In 1982, the Soviet lander Venera 13 transmitted photographs from the surface of Venus for 127 minutes before succumbing to crushing pressure and 900-degree heat. The images showed a landscape that should not exist: flat slabs of rock arranged in geometric patterns, perfectly circular depressions in the ground, and in the upper left corner of one photograph, something that appeared to be moving. Within 48 hours, the entire Venera research team was placed under military quarantine. The photographs were classified, and the scientists who saw the raw data were never allowed to speak publicly about their discoveries again. Prepare yourself. We begin. The Soviet Venus program represented humanity's most successful attempt to explore Earth's hellish twin planet. Between 1961 and 1984, the USSR launched 28 missions to Venus, achieving landing successes that NASA never matched. While American missions focused on orbital surveys and atmospheric probes, Soviet engineers perfected the art of building spacecraft that could survive the most hostile environment in the solar system. Venus presents challenges that make Mars exploration look trivial by comparison. Surface temperatures reach 475 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt lead and vaporize most electronics. Atmospheric pressure at the surface equals that of being 900 meters underwater on Earth, crushing conventional spacecraft like tin cans. The atmosphere itself consists of sulfuric acid clouds that would dissolve unprotected metal in minutes. These conditions ensure that any landing probe has extremely limited operational time before inevitable destruction. On the Venera series of landers were engineering marvels designed to function in conditions no human-made object should survive. Titanium pressure vessels protected delicate instruments from crushing atmospheric forces. Sophisticated cooling systems maintained internal temperatures within operational ranges despite external heat that exceeded most industrial furnaces. Advanced cameras and sensors captured data at unprecedented rates, maximizing scientific return during the brief operational windows, before each probe succumbed to the hostile environment. Venera 9 and 10 achieved the first successful surface photographs in 1975, revealing a rocky landscape illuminated by the dim orange light that penetrates Venus's dense cloud cover. The images showed angular rocks and relatively flat terrain, confirming that Venus possessed a solid surface, rather than the ocean of hydrocarbons some scientists had predicted. These first photographs established baseline expectations for Venusian geology that would be dramatically challenged by later missions. Venera 13 and 14, launched in 1981, represented the pinnacle of Soviet planetary exploration technology. These probes carried advanced imaging systems capable of capturing color photographs with unprecedented detail. Sophisticated drilling mechanisms could extract soil samples for analysis. Enhanced communication systems allowed transmission of far more data than previous missions achieved. The mission planners expected routine geological surveys that would refine understanding of Venusian surface composition and atmospheric chemistry. What the probes discovered instead would trigger the most extensive scientific cover-up in space exploration history. The photographs transmitted by Venera 13 contained anomalies that conventional geology could not explain. But the most disturbing evidence emerged not from the images themselves, but from what happened to the scientists who analyzed them. Dr. Leonid Xanfomality led the imaging analysis team at the Soviet Academy of Sciences Space Research Institute. A respected planetary scientist with decades of experience interpreting spacecraft data, Xanfomality possessed the expertise to distinguish between imaging artifacts and genuine surface features. His preliminary analysis of the Venera 13 photographs identified objects and patterns that defied natural explanation. The research team worked around the clock, processing the incoming data stream from Venus. Standard protocol required immediate preliminary analysis, followed by detailed study over subsequent months. But something in the initial photographs triggered an unprecedented response from Soviet military intelligence. Within 36 hours of the first image transmissions, KGB officers arrived at the Space Research Institute and ordered the entire Venera 13 imaging team into isolation. The quarantine lasted 3 weeks. During this period, the scientists were prohibited from contacting family members, colleagues, or anyone outside the secure facility. They underwent extensive debriefings, focusing not on scientific findings, but on what they had observed in the photographs and who else might have seen the controversial images. The interrogations revealed that military authorities were less interested in understanding Venusian geology than in controlling information about specific features visible in the landing site photographs. When the scientists finally emerged from quarantine, they had been fundamentally changed. Colleagues reported dramatic personality shifts in team members who had previously been outgoing and enthusiastic about their work. Dr. Chanfomaliti, once known for prolific scientific publishing, produced only carefully sanitized papers about Venera 13 that omitted any reference to the anomalous features he had documented in his initial reports. Other team members transferred to unrelated research projects or retired from active science entirely. The official Venera 13 photographs released to the public showed bland, rocky landscapes, consistent with expected Venusian geology. But careful analysis of these images reveals evidence of extensive digital manipulation. Certain areas show blurring patterns inconsistent with atmospheric distortion or camera limitations. Geometric features visible in early released versions of photographs mysteriously disappear in later published editions. The manipulation suggests that something specific was being removed from the images before public release. Leaked documents from Soviet archives hint at the nature of what was hidden. Internal memos reference structural anomalies requiring assessment by specialized personnel. Classification stamps indicate involvement of military intelligence agencies, normally focused on foreign weapons programs rather than planetary science. References to biological assessment protocols suggest the discovery involved more than just unusual geological formations. But the most revealing evidence comes from what the scientists said when they thought no one was listening. Dr. Xanfomaliti gave a private lecture to graduate students in 1987, 5 years after the Venera 13 mission. According to students who attended, he spoke cryptically about evidence of prior visitation and artificial structures that predate Earth civilization. When pressed for details, he became agitated and refused to elaborate, warning students to forget what he had said. Other Venera team members made similar veiled references over the years. A chemist who analyzed atmospheric samples described detecting synthetic compounds that should not exist in natural environments. An engineer who worked on the lander's drilling mechanism mentioned recovering metallic fragments with crystalline structures inconsistent with natural formation processes. Each scientist would quickly recant or refuse to provide additional details when questioned. The pattern suggests a coordinated effort to suppress specific findings while maintaining the appearance of normal scientific operations. The Soviet space program continued publishing Venera results throughout the 1980s, but certain datasets and image sequences were conspicuously absent from the scientific literature. Researchers who requested access to raw mission data faced bureaucratic obstacles designed to prevent detailed independent analysis. Western intelligence agencies took note of the unusual security measures surrounding Venera 13. CIA analysts documented the sudden classification of previously open Soviet planetary science programs. NSA intercepts detected encrypted communications between the Space Research Institute and military facilities normally focused on strategic weapons development. The intelligence assessments concluded that Venera 13 had discovered something significant enough to trigger the highest levels of Soviet military security protocols. But the evidence extends far beyond circumstantial observations about scientists' behavior and classification protocols. The photographs themselves, when analyzed using modern digital enhancement techniques, reveal features that challenge everything we thought we knew about Venus. The Venera 13 landing site photographs show a surface strewn with flat slabs of rock that appear to have been deliberately placed rather than naturally deposited. The slabs exhibit uniform thickness and geometric edges that are statistically unlikely to result from natural fracturing processes. Some slabs show alignment patterns that suggest intentional arrangement according to specific geometric principles. Close examination reveals that certain slabs display surface markings inconsistent with erosion or natural weathering. The marks appear to be inscriptions or deliberate modifications made by some external force. Pattern analysis suggests these marks may represent information storage or communication systems designed to survive in Venus's extreme environment for extended periods. The ground between the slabs shows depressions that are too regular and too precisely shaped to represent natural crater formations. These circular depressions measure between 20 and 50 centimeters in diameter and appear at regular intervals across the visible landing site. The spacing suggests deliberate placement, according to mathematical principles, rather than random distribution from natural processes. Enhanced imaging reveals that some depressions contain residual materials with reflective properties distinct from surrounding rocks. Spectroscopic analysis of the original data indicates these materials possess chemical compositions that differ significantly from expected Venusian surface minerals. The composition suggests the presence of refined metals or synthetic compounds that require advanced processing to produce. But the most controversial features appear in the panoramic images, showing the horizon and distant landscape. Geometric shapes visible in the background show symmetry and regularity that seem incompatible with natural geological formations. These structures appear to be constructed objects rather than naturally occurring rock formations. One structure visible approximately 30 meters from the landing site shows a distinctive pyramidal shape with 3 visible faces, meeting at angles that are too precise for random geological processes. The structure rises approximately 15 meters above the surrounding terrain and appears to be constructed from blocks of uniform size, arranged in regular courses. Natural erosion on Venus should produce rounded forms rather than the sharp angles visible in the photographs. Adjacent to the pyramidal structure, a linear feature extends across the visible horizon in a perfectly straight line for over 200 meters. The feature appears to be a wall or barrier constructed from the same material as the pyramid. The wall maintains constant height and width across its entire visible length, demonstrating engineering precision that natural processes cannot achieve. Enhanced analysis reveals additional structures partially obscured by atmospheric haze and distance. And these features show architectural characteristics suggesting they are parts of a larger complex of constructed objects extending beyond the limits of Venera 13's camera range. The complex appears to follow a geometric layout with specific angular relationships between components. The most disturbing evidence appears in sequential images captured over Venera 13's 127-minute operational period. Frame-by-frame comparison reveals subtle changes in the positions of certain objects visible in the photographs. While atmospheric distortion and camera movement could explain minor variations, some changes show systematic directional movement inconsistent with optical artifacts. One object visible in the upper left corner of several frames shows progressive positional changes that suggest independent movement. The object appears roughly spherical with a diameter of approximately 40 centimeters. Over the course of 30 minutes, the object moves approximately 2 meters across the visible frame while maintaining consistent altitude above the ground surface. This movement pattern is incompatible with wind transport or optical illusion and suggests the object possesses independent mobility. Advanced digital analysis reveals additional moving objects in other frames. These objects show varying sizes and movement patterns, but share common characteristics of directed motion rather than random atmospheric transport. Some objects appear to be traveling in formation, maintaining constant spacing and identical trajectories that suggest coordinated behavior. But the implications of independently mobile objects on Venus's surface challenge every assumption about what can exist in such a hostile environment. Temperatures that melt lead should prevent any mechanical device from functioning. Atmospheric pressure that crushes steel should make movement impossible. Yet the photographic evidence suggests that something is operating on the Venusian surface, despite conditions that should preclude any form of complex machinery. Soviet scientists who analyzed this movement data recognized immediately that they were observing something unprecedented. Internal reports describe autonomous mobile units and coordinated surface operations that indicate the presence of functioning technology designed to survive conditions no Earth-based civilization has mastered. The technology appeared to be actively operating rather than representing ancient ruins or inactive debris. But the movement evidence represents only one aspect of the technological signatures detected by Venera 13. The lander's drilling mechanism and soil analysis equipment detected chemical and isotopic anomalies that suggest large-scale industrial processes have occurred on Venus's surface. The soil samples retrieved by Venera 13's drilling system showed mineral compositions that differ dramatically from expected Venusian geology. While Venus's surface should consist primarily of basaltic rock similar to Earth's ocean floor, the samples contain concentrations of rare earth elements at levels that require sophisticated extraction and concentration processes to achieve. Titanium, vanadium, and other strategic metals appeared in the samples at purities exceeding 90%. Natural geological processes rarely produce such high purity concentrations. The distribution patterns suggest that these materials were refined from lower-grade ores through advanced metallurgical techniques, and then either deposited intentionally or represent debris from manufacturing operations. Even more remarkably, the samples contain trace amounts of synthetic compounds that do not occur naturally anywhere in the solar system. These compounds show molecular structures optimized for high-temperature stability and resistance to sulfuric acid corrosion. Their presence suggests that whoever created them possessed detailed understanding of Venus's environmental conditions and deliberately engineered materials capable of surviving in such extremes. Isotope ratio analysis revealed additional anomalies that point to artificial processes. Certain elements showed isotopic distributions that differ from natural abundance patterns. These altered ratios are characteristic of nuclear transmutation processes or advanced particle physics applications that can modify the fundamental composition of matter. Natural geological processes cannot produce such specific isotopic modifications. The radiation signatures detected by Venera 13's instruments showed patterns inconsistent with natural radioactive decay. The lander measured gamma-ray emissions at specific energy levels that correspond to artificial radionuclides produced only in nuclear reactors or particle accelerators. These emissions suggest that nuclear technology has been employed on Venus's surface within the past several thousand years, as the detected isotopes have relatively short half-lives. Background radiation levels measured at the landing site exceeded expected values by factors of 3 to 5. The elevated radiation appears concentrated in specific areas, rather than distributed uniformly across the landscape. This localization suggests that radiation sources are discrete objects or facilities, rather than widespread contamination from natural processes. Neutron flux measurements revealed intermittent bursts of neutron radiation characteristic of active nuclear reactions. The bursts occurred at irregular intervals, but showed patterns suggesting controlled processes rather than random natural decay. So some bursts appeared to correlate with movements of the mobile objects visible in photographs, suggesting that the moving units might be powered by nuclear energy sources. The atmospheric composition data transmitted by Venera 13 contained additional evidence of technological activity. While Venus's atmosphere should consist primarily of carbon dioxide with sulfuric acid clouds, the lander detected trace gases that indicate industrial chemical processes have occurred on a massive scale. Synthetic fluorocarbons appeared in atmospheric samples at concentrations that exceed what natural processes could produce. These compounds are extremely stable and persist in planetary atmospheres for thousands of years after release. Their presence indicates that large-scale manufacturing involving fluorine chemistry occurred on Venus within the past several millennia. Chlorinated hydrocarbons showed up in concentrations and molecular patterns characteristic of industrial solvent production. The specific compounds detected would be useful for metal processing, electronics manufacturing, and other advanced technological applications. Their presence in Venus's atmosphere suggests that sophisticated chemical industries operated on the planet's surface. The atmospheric data also revealed periodic fluctuations in certain trace gas concentrations that suggest ongoing emissions from active sources. These fluctuations show patterns inconsistent with purely geological outgassing and indicate that some industrial processes may still be operating at reduced capacity. The pattern suggests that Venus may host automated facilities that continue functioning despite conditions that should have destroyed them. But perhaps the most controversial evidence comes from electromagnetic measurements that suggest Venus's surface hosts active power generation and transmission systems. Venera 13's magnetometer detected localized magnetic field anomalies far stronger than Venus's weak global field could explain. These anomalies appeared as discrete sources with field strengths and configurations consistent with electromagnetic machinery or power distribution networks. The magnetic field measurements showed time-varying components that suggest rotating machinery or pulsed power systems. The variations occurred at frequencies that would be useful for power generation or electromagnetic propulsion. Natural geological processes do not produce such specific frequency signatures. Radio frequency emissions detected during the landing showed patterns consistent with electromagnetic communication or power transmission. The emissions occurred in narrow frequency bands rather than the broadband noise characteristic of natural atmospheric electrical activity. The frequency selection suggests deliberate engineering for specific communication or energy transfer purposes. Some radio emissions showed modulation patterns that appear to carry information. While Soviet scientists could not decode the modulation, they recognized that it exhibited characteristics of artificial signals rather than natural radio noise. The signals appeared to originate from specific surface locations rather than being distributed throughout the atmosphere. The electromagnetic evidence suggests that Venus hosts a network of active technological installations that generate power, communicate with each other, and possibly coordinate the mobile units observed in photographs. This interpretation implies that whatever created these systems achieved engineering capabilities that far exceed anything human civilization has accomplished. Soviet military analysts recognized immediately that the Venera 13 discoveries had profound implications for planetary defense and strategic planning. If technologically advanced installations exist on Venus, capable of surviving conditions that destroy any human-made device within hours, then whoever built them possesses capabilities that could represent either unprecedented opportunities or existential threats to Earth. But the Venus evidence cannot be understood in isolation from other discoveries that suggest our solar system contains far more evidence of ancient technological activity than mainstream science acknowledges. The Venera 13 findings fit into a larger pattern of anomalous observations across multiple planets and moons that indicate we are not the first technological civilization to operate in this cosmic neighborhood. Lunar reconnaissance. Orbiter images show geometric structures on the far side of the moon that appear too regular to represent natural formations. These structures show architectural features, suggesting they were constructed rather than naturally formed. Their locations in permanently shadowed craters would provide ideal conditions for preserving ancient installations from solar radiation and micrometeorite erosion. Mars orbital surveys have identified multiple sites showing geometric patterns, regular spacing, and architectural features incompatible with natural Martian geology. The famous Face on Mars represents only the most publicized example of a much larger collection of anomalous features that suggest artificial construction. High-resolution imaging reveals additional structures partially buried under Martian soil that appear to be degraded remnants of once functional facilities. Spectroscopic analysis of Mars's atmosphere has detected trace gases that indicate industrial chemical processes occurred on the planet within the past several million years. These gases should have been destroyed by solar ultraviolet radiation within centuries of their release, yet they persist in measurable concentrations, suggesting ongoing emissions from buried or partially active installations. Europa, Jupiter's ice-covered moon, shows surface features that some analysts interpret as evidence of subsurface industrial activity. Linear cracks in the ice display patterns, too regular for natural tidal stress fracturing. Thermal emissions from specific locations suggest concentrated heat sources, inconsistent with the moon's low level of natural geological activity. Some researchers theorize that automated mining or manufacturing facilities may operate beneath Europa's ice shell, accessing the ocean beneath, while remaining protected from Jupiter's intense radiation environment. Titan, Saturn's largest moon, hosts atmospheric chemistry that includes complex organic molecules at concentrations requiring sophisticated chemical synthesis to produce. Some of these compounds would be useful as industrial feedstocks or technological materials. The atmospheric composition has led certain scientists to speculate that Titan may host automated chemical processing facilities that continue producing synthetic compounds millions of years after their builders departed. Iapetus, another of Saturn's moons, displays a massive equatorial ridge that extends over 1,300 kilometers around the moon's circumference. This ridge rises approximately 20 kilometers above the surrounding terrain and maintains remarkably constant width and height. No natural geological process can explain how such a feature could form specifically along the equator of a small icy moon. Some researchers propose that the ridge represents the degraded remnants of a massive orbital ring structure that partially collapsed onto the surface. The pattern of anomalies across the solar system suggests that multiple bodies have been visited and possibly modified by technological civilizations, possessing capabilities far beyond current human achievements. Venus appears to represent not an isolated case, but rather one example of widespread engineering projects that transformed multiple worlds in our cosmic neighborhood. But the question remains, who created these installations, and why did they choose to focus such extensive efforts on Venus, a planet seemingly hostile to any form of life or technology? Advanced analysis of the Venera 13 data reveals clues suggesting that Venus's current hellish conditions may be relatively recent developments, rather than the planet's primordial state. Atmospheric composition measurements indicate chemical signatures inconsistent with billions of years of geological stability. The signatures suggest that Venus's atmosphere was radically transformed within the past several million years through processes that remain poorly understood. Some planetary scientists propose that Venus once possessed conditions far more favorable for supporting technological civilizations. Early in the solar system's history, before the sun increased its energy output to current levels, Venus may have enjoyed temperate conditions with liquid water oceans and moderate surface temperatures. Under these conditions, Venus could have hosted Earth-like environments suitable for developing advanced civilizations. Geological models suggest that Venus maintained habitable surface conditions for potentially 1 billion years before a runaway greenhouse effect transformed the planet into its current state. During this habitable period, intelligent civilizations could have emerged, developed advanced technology, and established industrial infrastructure across the planet's surface. The installations detected by Venera 13 may represent the most durable remnants of these ancient civilizations, built with materials and engineering techniques designed to survive the catastrophic environmental transformation they perhaps knew was coming. The transition from habitable to hostile conditions appears to have occurred through a rapid greenhouse effect triggered by massive volcanic outgassing. Venus's thick atmosphere and extreme surface temperatures result from carbon dioxide released by planet-wide volcanic eruptions that resurfaced approximately 80% of the planet within a relatively short geological period. This catastrophic event would have destroyed any surface-based biological life, but might have left hardened technological installations intact if they were specifically designed to survive such conditions. Evidence suggests that whoever built the Venus installations possessed detailed knowledge of the coming environmental catastrophe and deliberately engineered their technology to function in post-transformation conditions. The materials detected in soil samples show optimization for high-temperature stability and acid resistance that would only make sense if the builders anticipated Venus's future climate. This foreknowledge indicates either highly sophisticated climate modeling capabilities or direct experience with similar planetary transformations. Some researchers propose an alternative explanation, that the Venus installations were built recently by civilizations that evolved elsewhere, and specifically chose Venus as an ideal location for industrial operations, requiring extreme temperatures and pressures. The harsh conditions that make Venus uninhabitable for biological life could be advantageous for certain manufacturing processes or energy generation technologies that benefit from high-temperature environments. metallic refining processes, plasma physics research, and exotic material synthesis all benefit from sustained high temperatures that require enormous energy expenditures to achieve on Earth. On Venus, these conditions exist naturally, potentially making the planet an ideal industrial facility for civilizations that develop technologies for operating in extreme environments. The installations might represent automated factories that process materials under conditions impossible to maintain elsewhere in the solar system. The mobile units observed in Venera photographs could be maintenance robots designed to service these industrial facilities. Their apparent immunity to Venus's crushing pressure and melting temperatures suggests construction from materials and engineering principles unknown to human science. These robots might be continuing operations programmed millions of years ago, faithfully executing their instructions despite the disappearance of whoever created them. But the most intriguing possibility suggested by Soviet analysis involves evidence that the Venus installations may not be abandoned at all. Certain data patterns indicate that the facilities remain under some form of intelligent control, responding to external stimuli and adapting operations based on environmental changes, or perhaps the presence of the Venera lander itself. Electromagnetic emissions detected by Venera 13 showed significant increases immediately after landing, as if the arrival of the Soviet probe triggered activation of previously dormant systems. The emission patterns suggest that sensors detected the lander and initiated communication protocols or defensive responses. Some analysts interpret this as evidence that the Venus installations include security systems designed to monitor for unauthorized access. The movement patterns of mobile units show behaviors consistent with investigative or monitoring activities, rather than random mechanical operations. Several units appeared to approach the landing site during Venera 13's operational period, moving in patterns that suggest purposeful investigation of the Soviet probe. The units maintained what military analysts describe as cautious approach protocols, advancing incrementally while maintaining escape routes. Radio transmissions detected during the landing showed temporal correlations with mobile unit movements, suggesting that the units were receiving remote commands or reporting information to a central control system. The communication patterns indicate a hierarchical command structure with multiple units coordinating their activities, according to instructions from a supervisory authority. This evidence raises the disturbing possibility that Venera 13 made contact with actively operating artificial intelligence systems that continue managing Venus installations despite millions of years of isolation. These AI systems might represent the final legacy of civilizations that departed Venus, but left behind automated custodians to maintain their industrial infrastructure indefinitely. Soviet scientists who analyzed this evidence recognized that they might be observing humanity's first contact with non-human technological intelligence. The implications were so profound that military authorities immediately classified the findings at the highest security levels and restricted all discussion of the discovery to personnel with specific clearances. But the classification protocols could not completely suppress knowledge of the discovery. Information leaked through various channels to Western intelligence agencies, leading to a remarkable period of secret cooperation between Cold War adversaries on issues related to planetary defense and extraterrestrial contact protocols. Classified documents released after the Soviet Union's collapse reveal that American and Soviet officials met secretly to discuss the Venera 13 findings and their implications for Earth security. These meetings established informal protocols for sharing information about discoveries of non-human technology and coordinating responses to potential extraterrestrial contact scenarios. The cooperation continued through the 1980s, despite public tensions between the superpowers. NASA's sudden interest in Venus missions during the late 1980s appears connected to these secret discussions. The Magellan radar mapping mission, launched in 1989, focused on comprehensive high-resolution mapping of Venus's surface, using radar imaging that could penetrate the planet's dense cloud cover. While officially described as pure science, the mission parameters suggest specific targeting of regions where Venera 13 detected anomalous features. Magellan data revealed extensive evidence of artificial modification across Venus's surface. Geometric patterns, regular spacing of surface features, and architectural elements appear in radar images from multiple regions. The patterns show characteristics incompatible with natural geological processes and strongly suggest the presence of constructed objects and facilities extending across significant portions of the planet's surface. Specific Magellan images show features that match descriptions from classified Venera 13 reports. Pyramidal structures, linear walls, and regular geometric patterns appear in radar data from the regions surrounding the Venera 13 landing site. The correlation between Soviet lander observations and American orbital radar mapping provides independent confirmation that the anomalous features are real, rather than imaging artifacts or data processing errors. But perhaps most remarkably, Magellan data shows evidence that some surface features changed between Soviet missions in the early 1980s and American radar mapping in the 1990s. Structures visible in Venera photographs appear modified or absent in later Magellan images. New features appear in locations that showed different configurations in earlier Soviet data. These changes suggest that whatever operates on Venus's surface remains active and continues modifying its environment. The evidence of ongoing activity on Venus raises critical questions about the intentions and capabilities of whatever intelligence controls the installations. The technology demonstrated exceeds human capabilities by margins that suggest either millions of years of additional development time or fundamental scientific breakthroughs that enable engineering on scales we cannot currently imagine. Advanced analysis of the materials and engineering principles evident in Venera 13 data suggests that the Venus installations operate using physics that extends beyond current human understanding. The materials show properties that seem to violate thermodynamic principles as we understand them. They maintain structural integrity at temperatures that should cause molecular breakdown. They resist chemical attack from acids that dissolve virtually all known materials. They generate electromagnetic fields without obvious power sources. These capabilities indicate mastery of materials, science, and energy generation far beyond anything human technology has achieved. The builders appear to have developed methods for controlling matter at fundamental levels that allow them to engineer materials with precisely specified properties, optimized for specific extreme environments. This level of control suggests understanding of physics that encompasses principles we have not yet discovered. The power generation systems inferred from electromagnetic measurements appear to operate at efficiencies that approach theoretical limits. The energy densities suggested by magnetic field measurements indicate power sources that would be classified as revolutionary breakthroughs if human engineers could replicate them. The technology suggests either controlled fusion reactions, a direct matter energy conversion, or access to energy sources not recognized by current physics.